Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. Welcome back, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. Couple of announcements to get us started. Come check out Wild West Hackin' Fest, put on by Red Team specialists for anybody and everybody interested in information security. Join us on October 27th through the 28th for hands-on hardware hacking talks by famous InfoSecers like Dave Kennedy, Deviant, Egypt, Chris Nickerson, Chris Gates, Mike Poor, Sub-T, and more. Check us out on the web at wildwesthackinfest.com. That's HACKIN Fest.com. The first B-Sides in Uganda is upon us. B-Sides Kampala is going to be held October 14th through the 15th. The CFP is open until July 15th. Some topics of interest include network security, web application security, innovative attack and defense strategies, malware analysis, biometrics, and evolutionary computing robotics. Bonus points for bringing an actual robot. Visit them on the web at bsideskampala.com to submit your talk to the CFP today. Michael, what do we got in startup articles and discussion for this week?
Well, there's one we're going to have to get to in a minute, but I threw it in there mostly because it validates me. Actually, it's got good insights, so I wanted to share those out. But here's a topic you and I have been talking about for a while. Should startups care about profitability? Before we dig into it, what's your take? Obviously, it's a nuanced answer.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've always said this on the show before that I think there's this preconceived notion that a startup is like technology startups were in the dot-com boom, where you just have an idea, you get millions and millions of dollars, and then if you're successful or not, it doesn't really matter. And that's not how it works, right? You have to show profitability. And there's a number of different ways to show that, right? I'm not saying necessarily you have to be profitable, but I think there's a difference between being profitable and showing profitability.
I like that nuance. Yeah, as I'm thinking about this too, and one of the things I liked about the nuances in this particular article is the other thing you and I talk about is revenue. Like, as in, go get revenue. And we've said this now multiple times, go get your first $1,000. Then get somebody to give you $1,000 again, or get a repeat buy, depending on what you're selling or how you're pricing it or how you're working it. It's that type of stuff that starts to have that bigger impact on you and make that. And that's kind of what this point was. And so what's great about this article in particular is that there's growth and there's profitability, and that if you're taking on VC investment, they're going to be more interested in growth than they are profitability. And if you're bootstrapping or you're taking a different path, then profitability might make more sense to you. But then what really got into it is that revenue is different depending on the type of business you're in and how you run it and the type of vision that you have. And he's got a couple charts about like year 1 versus year 5, whereas in year 1, you might take a loss. In year 2, you might take a loss or break even. But by year 5, you're lighting it up because you had to make those strategic investments. You had to build the platform. You had to build out the whatever. And that takes more effort. That takes more energy. But here's the thing I really liked about this too. And the reason I'm bringing some of this up is because sometimes when I get pitches, people are quick to tell me how many revenues of quarterly growth or how many quarters of revenue growth they've had. Or they want to tell me, deal size or whatever. And some of that stuff is nice. But as I always point out to people, it always matters in context. So here's some questions I thought were really good. Is that one product line or is it multiple product line? 20% of the customers make up 80% of the revenue. Do the top 3 customers represent 80% of the revenue? And they call that, and this is a great point, it's called revenue concentration. The more concentrated your revenue, the higher the risk that your revenue could decline in the future. If you've got your eggs, very small eggs, very small basket, any one of them breaks, goes away, you tend to have big problems on your hand. So the question is, how diversified is your revenue? And then what that also leads to is, how then do you grow? So the question I always like to ask people about revenue is, where and how are you making your money? And then how do you grow? Like, you might not be in a position today to scale. Okay. What's the scale going to be? Are you going to scale with partners? Is that expensive? Is there a platform that exists? Are you going to scale by yourself? So, Paul, when you and I look at companies taking on their later stage rounds, their C, their D, their E rounds, I'm always now curious, looking at their information around it, is what are they going to do with the money, right? Because at that point, you're in growth mode. So how is that coming together? What are you going for? How does that work? And I just thought it was good. And I like the example. So if you like this kind of stuff, paying attention to and looking at the examples, just because somebody's profitable doesn't necessarily mean they're well run. Just because they're growing doesn't mean it's great. There's nuance in all this type of stuff. And I think that you can take a look at it. What's interesting is our guest, Fred, actually set us up for the second story. The number one most stupid reason that startups fail. Now, I said, I don't like this as a headline. Stupid reason? Stop. As you pointed out, it's clickbait. But Here's the thing. They created something that nobody wants to buy. I think we see this a lot in security. We get so deep in the weeds when we're in it. When you're in the enterprise, you're solving a problem. You keep solving the same problem, and you think, gosh, everybody's got this problem. If I just go create the solution, they're going to see it, they're going to love it, they're going to buy it. And then you do it, and they see it, they don't understand it, and they don't have any money for it.
And the disappointing part for me is that it doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad product or a bad idea.
That's exactly right.
No,
that's exactly right.
And I think we said it very early on in this show that really a successful startup or successful company is really built upon the sales and marketing and messaging. And that's a shame. And one of the reasons why we created this show, Michael, right, was to help people with that. And certainly I've been learning as I go along. And I've seen companies fail that have really great products because they didn't have that right messaging to clearly define and drive interest to their product that is solving a problem, maybe in a different way than what people traditionally solve that problem in. So, it's the most critical thing, I think, one of the most critical things for a business. And I think I agree with the article, the number one reason why startups fail.
Yeah, and so if we flip it around differently, it means that, so if you're listening right now and you think you've got an idea or you want to do something, you need to get outside your circle. If you talk to comedians, and this is absolutely the same, comedians take a while to build their best jokes. I think I've said this before, maybe even on this program. I'll be honest, that was a surprise to me. I thought that, if you've been around pro-level comedians, they're funny as hell all the time. So I, for some odd reason, just assumed that when they did a bit, they just got up and kind of freeformed it. Turns out, nope. Now, I don't want to say they're highly scripted. They're more than that. Like, they've got the beats down, the extra words are out. It's like if you've ever done improv. Improv is so liberating. I love improv. But then when you move and you try to go from improv to stand-up, you can do both. They're different. Stand-up's a different beast. What happens, though, is that they start by observing things, and they look for common situations. They look for common problems. They look for common challenges. They look for peculiarities. And then they say, look, I might ask my spouse or my family or my friends what they think, but frankly, they're biased, or they're not going to tell me the truth or whatever. And so they start to know a joke is ready when they can bring it to people that they don't actually know, and that people get a reaction to it. And there's it's famous. Chris Rock does this all the time. In fact, a lot of people, Chris Rock will go to an open mic night, and he's basically there, he's got his glasses on, he's got pads of paper sitting down, and he's just kind of reading jokes and looking up. No, all right, that one didn't work. And people are like, he's not funny at all. No, he's not, but he will be. I think it's the same thing with this. You need to ask people ahead of time, right? Like, who has this problem? What's the problem that they're trying to solve, which we're going to get to in a second. Mm-hmm. And then how do I solve it? Is this a problem that's pervasive? Is it a problem that they'll pay money to make go away? And if one person's like, yeah, I love it, good. But we just said, right, one person is going to concentrate too much revenue, concentrate too much risk. I like 5, 10. You can get 10 different people to validate that for you. Yeah, you're off to the races. But as you've pointed out, just because they didn't, the thing I see a lot of times in security too is, and I've been really fascinated, Paul, in this last year or two, taking a lot of pitches and writing stories about things that we talked about 20 years ago. Totally not possible 20 years ago. Completely possible today. So your idea might just be a little ahead of time. And that's frustrating. I get it. but it's okay. All right.
All
the
good
question.
Stuff. Yeah.
What problem are you trying to solve? I mean, look, I kind of knew, right? It says there's one question you must ask before solving any problem. It's also the most underrated management skill. And it basically says, like, look, you got to formulate a problem statement. And I smiled because it says there are few questions in business more powerful than what problem are you trying to solve? and at the risk of being too excited about it, Paul, I've met people when you and I actually break out and go to conferences that have stepped up and said, look, I'm using that all the time now. Good. Yeah. Keep using it. That's the goal.
It extends so far from even just business, right? And those of you that watch Paul's Security Weekly know that we have technical segments. And one of my frustrations with the technical segments was that people would just come on and start digging into the technical problem, or the technical solution rather, and showing someone how to do something technical. Now, I front end all of the technical segments, and I tried to do this a number of different ways. It turns out just flat out asking, hey, before you get into it, tell me what problem you're trying to solve. That sets the stage so much better for that content. And there's a great example that kind of like outside of some of the other use cases for the question, which sounds weird, but here's a use case that I used it last night on the show. And the title really didn't convey to me what we were talking about in that segment. I asked what problem you're trying to solve, and I got the answer I was looking for. It set the stage for our listeners and viewers, and now everyone's like, wow, that was really awesome. And it turns out what Justin had last night was very groundbreaking and very, very relevant to today's problems that enterprises face. So there you have awesome. A use case for it.
So let me amplify what you just said and give people another way to realize it. When you get the problem statement right, when you've defined the problem clearly, you've given the ability to focus. And so the reason I always point out, you need to be able to ask it as a question.
Yes.
When you've got it scoped tight enough and you ask it as a question, our brain locks onto it, and you don't really I would say you have a choice, but just so we're clear, you don't. Your brain will process it until you get to a satisfactory resolution or the realization that you're running down a rabbit hole and clickbait, etc. Mm-hmm. But so when you do that, you're helping people focus, and that's freaking awesome. Now, this broke this down so well. What does a good problem statement look like? It said there needs to be a clear target, a desired state. So you got to have a clear target, the desired state. You'll hear me call that the better tomorrow. In fact, the language I'd like to use is paint me a picture of your better tomorrow. You'll notice I'm not saying it's a vision statement. What's the vision? What's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the outcome? Although I will sometimes ask, if we solve this successfully, what happens? What is the outcome you're seeking? But a lot of times I'll say, how are we elevating? Right? Like, what are you trying to elevate here? So you got to know where you're heading, but you also have to know where you are. What's the current situation look like? And then what it says is there needs to be a clear gap between them. Yeah, here's the way I like to look at that. What's the impact of doing nothing? What are the consequences? So you told me the current state. You told me where you'd like to be. Okay. And if we do nothing, what happens? What are the consequences of that problem? Because frankly, if there's no consequences, there's no urgency. There's no need to move. Now, that doesn't mean trump it up and throw salt in the wound and it's the worstest ever, because we're all immune to that now. Every pitch I get starts out with some stat about how horrible everything is, and it's total crap. And once you throw that out, it's like, we don't have anything. Now, this also says the most common mistakes you see in the problem statements. By far, now I'm going to quote this, the biggest mistake is formulating a problem statement that is a solution in disguise. Yeah, absolutely, 100%, that's the biggest problem. So what this means, this is what happens. You've been muddling around, you've got a problem, and you find a solution to it. Well, maybe you found a solution to it. You find something you think is the solution to it. So then when I ask you what the problem is, you define the problem to me in terms of your solution. That's a mistake if you're in the enterprise. That's a mistake if you're in the industry. The trick is, show me the problem. And we've talked about this before, Paul. The solution just needs to be the inverse of the problem.
Right.
If you get that right, then tell me about how you solve it differently, what you do there. Second mistake, skipping the problem statement altogether. I think this article is right, that the biggest mistake is formulating the problem statement as a solution. But this one it parallels it because when I ask this question most of the time, I get blank stares or BS. usually blank stares followed by BS. The third mistake is the lack of quantification. So like they give an example, the morale around here is bad, which is not a good problem statement. A better one is to say, we want our net promoter score to be X and now it's Y. Here's the gap between them. Quick aside, net promoter scores are interesting. There was a case study done about 10, 15 years ago. It worked for a car company. Now everybody does it. Guys, if you don't know how a net promoter score works for you, stop using them. Like just telling me you want it to be high. Like it's a good example, but it also gave me the ability to say, stop. That's not always the solution. But that said, what I would say a lot of times as a third mistake is it's overscoped. It's what I call a compound problem. And so you'll simplify it to me. So for example, and I'll get this around third party risk, there's just too many vendors for me to assess. Or I've had this said to me as well. Well, Michael, I mean, my team is small. I can't possibly assess everybody. So my problem is I don't have enough people. No, those aren't the problems. And when you start unpacking it, what you start to realize is there's like 4, 5, 6 different problems. Now, this is where problem statements really matter. Where do you focus first? That's why you've got to get down to here's the current situation. Here's how I'd like it to be better. Here's the consequences to it. And then when you go from the problem statement into a value proposition, what's the value that you'll create solving that problem, and what's the impact of that solution? As you get through that, you can prioritize. And I have not yet had a case where even somebody faced with 3, 4, 5 different choices, usually within an hour, just what we can do in an hour, sketching out quick thoughts to these and answering those questions in that order, getting the problem statement right, then adding some light value, some light impact to it. It's almost always okay, I got it. Let's go here first. And that's the priority to it. And so that's why they say this is such important from a management perspective. Before you commit energy, before you commit funds to something, before you go in a direction, what are you doing? What problem are you solving? And then if you're in a startup, who's going to pay for that? What's their interest? And right. And then I guess if we go back and stitch our whole day together so far, and does that create profitability for you? Does it create revenue? How's all that going to work? So, we know I'm going to bring up more stories like this. I mean, it's a powerful question. But what I liked about this was, it's somebody else's perspective on a question that we know I ask a lot. But it's also this is great advice. There's not a thing in here that I disagree with. In fact, if you go back into what's the Sloan Management Review, it's got a link in here to that. I've already downloaded that stuff and started to pour through it. It is some of the best writing that I have come across in a decade.
Which one is this?
So right in the link for the one question you might ask, right in the top, it's basically built on the most underrated skill in management, which was published in the Sloan Management Review, very similar to the Harvard Business Review. Yeah. And they'll give you 3 free articles a month. Totally worth spending one of your free credits on to grab that. It's
nice.
It's one of the best pieces I've read in a long time.
Your next article has like a 403 hour or so.
That's only because, so go to that. Yeah, I fixed it in the show notes. Go to that last, take off that last 2. That was a wiki problem on my part. This one I loved. So the headline, to grow faster, hit pause and ask these questions. And it's Stripe's COO. Stripe's been on a tear. They're doing absolutely fantastic stuff. I love using Stripe. They have made it so simple. They're great. But to grow faster, hit pause. It's called a tactical pause. Or at least a lot of people call it a tactical pause. It is a military concept. It is a business concept. And what it basically says is if you feel like you're losing your mind, stop. And it's so counterintuitive. People are like, no, I got to keep pushing. I got to push harder. I got to go faster. Sometimes the answer is stop. Take a deep breath and ask some questions, because then you're going to keep yourself in alignment, right? So as I've spent more time looking at this, that lets you kind of go calibrate against what problem are we trying to solve? What value are we creating? In fact, it lets you say, wait, are we creating value? And are we lined up? Are we focusing our limited time, effort, energy, resources on the right things? By the way, you could have just taken a $100 million funding round, which we'll talk about shortly. You still have to do things like tactical pauses and make sure you're in really good shape. So first of all, I like those a ton. But then I like some of these questions that they ask about. So here's first one. Have we documented our operating principles? Right? It's the core tenets. It's the way that you work. And so here's a couple that they have that I liked. Users first, think rigorously, right? Using first principles to get there. This is problem solving stuff. It's all the stuff we've already been talking about. Are you trust and amplify? This plays to a lot of the language that I like to use. But think about that for a second. Are you documenting how you're doing stuff? Look, and this is the trap a lot of startups fall into. 5 people, you're able to do it, right? So you hear me talk about translation friction. Okay, congratulations, you got your round. Now you got 10, now you got 15, now you got 20 people. Okay, well, so you're not the same company. By its nature, you have more points of friction. And then you're trying to scale into the marketplace. How's that working? How do you guys make sure you're in alignment? How do you trade information? How are you growing as a company? What matters? How do you operate? And what I find consistently is the companies that think through that question do better. Notice I didn't say the companies that get it right or the companies that have it completely documented. Sometimes just asking the question and giving it some mind share, not lip service, mind share. You don't have to be perfect with it. You just got to think about it because it's really important. So I like that question a lot. What structure is going to help us achieve our goals? I think that is such an important question. And to be fair, I love when you're confident enough as a leader to ask this question of your team. This works, by the way, in an enterprise. I've had this with enterprise leaders. Should security be centralized or decentralized, or should it be a hybrid? Who should report to whom? Are we a flat structure or are we not a flat structure? Should I report to the CIO, CFO, or legal, or somebody else? Yeah. The answer is I don't know. What's your situation? Same thing here, but what I like is asking my colleagues or my team. If you ever hear me say the people who work for me, that's like a distress signal. I don't talk that way, but I definitely want to work with people. I see my role in elevating them. I like to ask them. I want to ask them how they want to work. How do they see it? How do they identify it? What do they see functionally versus process versus whatever else? I have never been amazed. I've never not been amazed by the insights people will share. And P.S., if they have a voice in the process, then we just met the fundamental human need of being heard and validating them. And they want to contribute to the team. They want to know they had a role in it. They want to know what their role is, that this stuff is so important. So I really dig that. This next question, I totally dig. Who has been successful at our company so far? Yeah. What's interesting? We tend to focus on the people who aren't successful. Oh, so-and-so is not cutting it. So-and-so is not making it fit. And there's a lot of stuff, and if I come across any new research on it, I'll share it. But there's been a lot around like A players and B players and C players, and whether you should try to help your B players be more like A players, or whether you should help your C players be more like B players, or whether you should just fire them entirely. And it's nuanced, except for this. It's always fascinating to me when companies don't figure out who's really performing and go ask why. And I think it's a great thing to do. And ask them what else they need. Because the other thing that happens a lot of times is you take somebody who's a high performer and you can't visualize them in any other role because they're so important in that role. It's like an actor being typecast. And she can't break out of that type because that's the way she's been cast and she really wants to. Same thing in your organization. You've got somebody who's a high performer. In my world, I want to keep that high performer. So I want to understand what they're doing that's successful that I can maybe have other people emulate. And I want to make sure that they're happy and growing and see a future. Because if not, I want to start making those changes now so that they stay, so that they're happy, because I think that that's really important. The last piece here, and I thought this was really counterintuitive, and I'm going to add my own. The last piece I wanted to point out, at least, there's more in this. Do we have a 5-year plan? And so it says, look, it can be 3 to 5 paragraphs. It can be macro goals, but then here's what happens when you have that is what we're doing right now in alignment with that goal. Here's why this is important. I have an exercise I've called the Career Compass for about 10 years. I don't advertise it. I've not figured out how to monetize it. At some point, I'll probably just write it up and make it free. But when people call me and they ask for career advice, so this matters and it's fascinating how well this works for startups and even your team. I always ask them where they see themselves, where they want to be in a year, in 3 to 5 years, and 7+ years. And to be fair, 7+ years is infinity. So I don't really care. But what I'm trying to understand is, do you want to be the CISO? Do you want to own a startup? If you're in a startup, do you want to be a funded startup? Do you want to be an IPO? Do you want to be acquired? Do you just want to be holding your own? Is it a lifestyle? But lots of questions on that. And what I usually tell people is think through that question in more than one dimension. It's not a numbers thing only. It's a quality of life. It could be a location. Do you want to live on a beach? Do you want to be a beach bum like me? Do you want to, but what's your interest? And then how does that work? And what matters then is that's an alignment. All it is it becomes your guiding star. Will the world change in 5 years? Yeah, 5 years is infinity. I don't actually care the substance of the 5-year plan. What I want to know is, does it seem reasonable, and does it give you a good direction ahead? And if so, then you now have something to go back and calibrate decisions against and say, is this in alignment? Does this help us reach that goal? Which, by the way, is why I usually ask 1 year, 3 to 5 year, and 7+ years. What I'm looking at is, where do you want to end up? Where are you now? So tactically, what steps do you need to take? And then strategically, what steps do you need to take that give you the insight to either pursue that goal or realize it's time for a course correction? They're all good. So I love this. I mean, I think this is some really good stuff. It's a slightly longer goal, and it does ask about measuring employee experience. So you tend to think, I like all that. It talks about decision making. I'd like that stuff too. There's a ton here to digest, but I don't know. I've done a lot of the talking on it. What are your thoughts, Paul?
I actually wanted to transition to talking about this conference article. I think you covered that previous article very well. I agree. This conference article is kind of interesting. I think there's some good stuff in there, and there's some so-so stuff in there, and I think you'd put that in there on purpose, so I'd kind of pick on it a little bit.
Yeah. No, yeah. So let's do this, because you and I talk, at least off mic, a lot about going to conferences, and we both have kids, and it's tough for us running our own startups and being active on our families to then make time to disrupt all that to go to a conference. All right. So what did you like in this, and what should we maybe call out? For
startups, I've seen startups do this. The first 2 tips are solid, right? I mean, tip 1 is have a perfect pitch, and we've talked about that on the show before. Now you're going to take that message and you're going to bring it to a conference. When you're a startup, don't necessarily go for the high price tag, super popular conferences, because it's going to chew through your budget and you might not get the return on it. Look for free or easy to attend conferences. Totally agree with that. I mean, we still do this today at Security Weekly. Never mind startups, right? If there's a local conference, we can broker some kind of deal where both parties benefit. We'll go to the conference and we'll show up because it's great for networking. And I think startups should absolutely do that. I think it's a great tip.
Let me point out one thing in this that I really like is this tip. Get your pitch perfect, but then, and this is the most important line, watch their reactions and focus on the elements that get their attention. We get so caught up in the bubble and we get so excited I've got the pitch, I'm very slick, it's perfect. Yeah, throw that out the window. This is a fantastic facility for you to go throw it out there and watch the reaction. Mm-hmm. And then when they say something that's interesting, say, that's interesting, awesome, tell me more. And then shut the hell up and listen.
And I think that's important to segue into when you get back from the conference, to write down what you've learned, right? Flesh it out. I think that I take notes personally after the conferences we attend, have conversations, talk about what happened at the conference. Super important. And I hate it when articles do this. They're like, don't worry about this. And then the next tip is, well, focus on this. So ignore networking basics and don't care about people's name. And then the next tip is how to remember people's names. I don't know how you feel about how important that is, Michael. And I do say feel, because I feel like it's a kind of a gut reaction kind of thing. It depends on the conference, the person or people you're talking to. I do struggle to remember people's names, and I am going to take some of those tips to be able to do that. It's been kind of on my to-do list to get better at remembering people's names. And I know there's tricks to do that. I don't know how well those tricks work. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Michael. Curious.
I do have thoughts on that. And I'm going to kind of come at it this way. There's nothing more powerful in the English language than hearing your own name. Mm-hmm. We're learned to do it since we were kids, which, by the way, then means that if you meet me and you call me Mike, I'm like, wow, so you totally don't pay attention. I'm not a Mike. I've never been Mike. I'm a Michael, always. And so I now keenly pay attention to that. So one of the ways you can start to remember people's names is you can say, do you like, I guess with names that get shortened, do you like James or Jim? Are you a Mike or a Michael? Are you a Jen or a Jennifer or what? And you let people talk about that, because that lets people talk about themselves. That's always good. What I've learned doing this is that sometimes you forget people's names. I mean, look, Paul, you go to a lot of conferences, you speak at a lot of events, you've done a lot of interviews. I'd like to think you and I could both remember all the stuff we've done. We're also old enough now that sometimes we don't. And what I've learned to say to people is, our conversation has been good. You're important to me, and I'm really sorry. I don't remember your name. Remind me.
Yeah.
And guess what? They totally remind me. And sometimes I don't remember it again. And I'll say, look, I must be at that age. I'm really sorry, but I do want to know. And it's look, I don't mind if people ask me. Here's the flip side to it that I'm also attuned to. There are people, because Paul, we like it when people use our names, Paul. And so every chance they can, Paul, they're going to keep using your name, Paul. Stop. People, if you're doing
I didn't
that,
like
knock
that tip
it
either.
off.
I think that's annoying. I think that's annoying when people do that.
Politicians do this, and it's fascinating how well it works. He knew my name. He held my hand. He looked at me. He called me by name. Yeah, cool. Listen, if you know who I am, use my name and use it where it fits. But I'm going to forge a connection. They're going to no, stop. It's creepy and it feels creepy. It doesn't feel natural. So please stop doing it. My basic advice is I think people's names matter.
Yeah.
I'll give you one more piece of advice. When you shake hands, right? We shake hands with the right hand. Your name tag should be on the opposite side that most of us put it, so that when you're shaking somebody's hand, your eyes naturally will extend out, and you want that name tag to be right where it's really easy to meet. So like if you write your own, Paul should be really big, and then Asadorian, if at all, should be smaller. Just like me, I put Michael big letters, Santa Arcangelo. I don't even bother anymore. Yeah. I'm like, look, I'm just Michael.
The tip in the article is to take a second and think of a person with the same name that could be a celebrity, and picture that person standing next. Does that work? I haven't tried that.
No, I think sometimes it does, and then sometimes it creates confusion. There's other mnemonic tricks around, like create different rooms in a house and put them in different rooms associated with different objects. Look, if you're really disciplined at that stuff, it works. And sometimes what I've found in my own experience is that if they remind you of somebody that you already know, and you say that, wow, you remind me of my friend Kevin or whatever. But by the way, if you say it to me, I'll tell you right now, my response, I'll either say, I'm sorry, did I just cause you a nightmare? Right? I don't say PTSD because you and I both have a lot of friends that unfortunately suffer PTSD. So I don't mock that, and I don't recommend anybody else mock that. But I will say something self-deprecating to that nature, or I'll say, okay, is that good or bad?
Right.
And it's funny because sometimes people will say, well, he's kind of a jerk. I'm like, so, and like, no, I really mean you just look like him.
Yes,
I'm like, so now you're telling me I look like a jerk. Great. But you know what? They'll remember me. So I guess if we're trying to do tip 5 and make your conversation memorable.
Yeah. That one was kind of, it's hard. I think you're gonna remember people and situations for so many different reasons that if you have some effort behind making something memorable, it's going to look unnatural. It's going to seem unnatural. That would be my
that's what I was going to say. Again, if you take that as a call to a gimmick, please don't. It's going to feel like a gimmick.
Right.
Here's what I would say though. I tend to remember people who don't just repeat to me a bunch of bullshit. So if you read the latest headline and you're repeating me the headline, I'm not interested, man. And if you do the whole, how's the weather today? Stop.
Yeah. But the memorable moments for me are always natural. Like, for example, at RSA, when the fire alarm went off and I had to walk outside in my pajamas and I was riding the elevator with Greg Foss. Like that, I remember that. Greg remembers, right? That's kind of hard to forget some of those memorable moments at conferences with people. And I do sometimes remember people who I've only met once just because something like ridiculous happened. We were in the same situation together and something ridiculous happened. So keep that stuff in a natural course and don't try and like make something ridiculous happen and force it, because that's going to seem weird.
Yeah, Bonnie talked about that. Bonnie from One Stop Startup, and she said, "Look, you're out back having a cigarette, and the person sits down. Have a real conversation as a human. Maybe you make a connection." And I think that's the thing, right? Anytime it feels forced, you're like, "Okay, you're trying too hard. Just stop." And I find that myself as well. So. Hopefully good stuff for people.
Some good stuff in, I really want to talk about Amazon and Cybereason. Those are the ones I'm excited about, certainly.
Good. Well, yeah, so let me just throw the IoT thing out there because, as you and I got started with this, IoT is not new, right? I mean, you and I have talked about this. It's embedded devices, it's autonomous stuff, it's connecting to network. There's so many different ways that it works, and then of course there's really two distinctions now, right? There's IoT and there's industrial IoT. IoT. We see vendors getting spun up to handle it. And I'll be clear. I threw this in because I think it's interesting. If you're looking into the startup realm today, I'd love to know what you're doing about this. I'd love to know where the problem is. So security breaches affect half of U.S. firms using IoT. I don't know what this means. It throws out a bunch of fancy numbers, like around this 13.4% of the total revenues. It has this type of an impact. It all sounds good. I know a lot of people are losing their minds over IoT and the security and the potential implications to it. I think it's overdone. Do I think that we have real needs and opportunities? Yes. So what I want to see is stop telling me how bad this is. Start telling me what the solutions look like.
Right.
Start offering it to me. Start bringing it to market and showcasing it. And so I'm going to look for some of those solutions. And that was really just it. I mean, I like data points like this. I think it's useful. So if this is something you've got an idea around or you've got a solution, it might be something worth taking a look at. I'm pretty sure there's going to be investment dollars for this for the foreseeable future.
Right.
So it's something to take a look at. But the news last week, so when Matt joined us as a co-host, thoroughly great conversation. And one of the things as we were show prepping was the rumor last week was that Amazon was going to buy Slack. Mm-hmm. And an hour later, congratulations, Amazon now owns Whole Foods. And P.S., they're going to be a minority investor in Slack, and Slack's valuation is different, and they're doing this different round. Wow, what a difference a week makes. So Paul, I love your take of the Amazon Whole Foods and just Amazon in general. So what's your take on it? What did you think?
It's interesting. I have a lot of thoughts about Amazon. I think that first and foremost, being the leader in the cloud and in cloud really provider, both on the hosted platform and application side, I think that it's amazing how they've influenced the whole startup culture and how they've been able to compete and displace essentially Google and Microsoft and Cisco in that realm and basically made them play catch up in one of the most popular technology sectors in the world today. So when you think about their kind of sitting back and going, well, we're number one here, I think this fills another gap on their retail side, where I think they've got a lot more work to do as a user experience using Amazon. There are some increasingly frustrating things that have happened with Amazon, certainly, and we can talk about those too. And I think it's interesting that the melding of these two companies would be very interesting because I think that the audience and the target market for Whole Foods is very different from the Amazon customer, and I'm curious to see how those two blend together, because I think that the Whole Foods target market and kind of persona is the person who likes to physically go into a store and hold things and look at things and read labels and really understand their product in a hands-on environment, whereas that's not your typical Amazon customer, right? Like we are subscribe and save, Prime shipping. I want to read some reviews, get the most popular product, add to cart, and it shows up on my door the next day. It's going to be interesting how that plays out. I do think that they're trying to, compete with the Walmarts and some of the other competitors in that space.
Well, I got to tell you, let's stay on that for a second, because that's one of the things we brought up last week. One of the early analysis that came out of Adam Lipinski. Mm-hmm. For Fortune, and I get his daily newsletter, and I think he's got his finger on a lot of stuff. And he said, or he at least pointed out, Amazon. And in fact, I don't know if it was he who said this or somebody else. Amazon's trying to be Walmart before Walmart can be Amazon.
Yep.
And Walmart has a huge presence here in Myrtle Beach. And I was talking about this last week. They have what we collectively call Green Walmart. They've got the green roofs, and it's a grocery store, basically. Yep. It's fantastic. But here's the thing. If you want anything at Walmart now, you can order it, and they'll have it at the grocery store for you in 2 days. You just show up, pick it up. Mm-hmm. That's really easy. In fact, now they've started, and I haven't taken advantage of it yet, but that just means I'm an idiot. I think at the one we go to, I can phone in my order or, do my order online ahead of time and just go pick up the groceries. No extra charge. Yep. Just there it is. There you go. And now what I've started to notice is So Amazon's actually tried some stuff with UPS. Like you can have a locker, and instead of getting it delivered to your door, it just gets delivered to the locker. And
Yeah, and for people living in apartments, that's fantastic.
Okay, I was gonna say, because that for me, I'm like, how about you just bring it to my door? Thanks.
Yeah, no, but for in especially in larger cities like New York and stuff, and I know people who live in apartments, like getting packages is a pain in the ass. So I can totally see that working.
If you think about where Whole Foods tend to be located, Whole Foods is very good about going to places where people have high discretionary income and they are more discerning. So now imagine if you could place your order on Amazon, and then when you're going to go to Whole Foods, it was already there for you.
Yep.
Maybe even same day. I think this solves a huge problem for them. But it's interesting because, Walmart has been on an acquiring spree. It's astonishing, right? In the same week, they bought Bonobos, the men's clothing retailer, online stuff. And so Amazon buying a traditional retailer is interesting. And Amazon stock went up, and then Publix stock went down, Safeway's stock went down, and Walmart stock went down as a response to it. Now, these are blips. It's just the market signaling things that they think are interesting. So to your point, I think it's going to be fascinating. People have tried figuring out the grocery model for a really long time. So what I'm also be curious to see now is, how does this change? Now that Amazon owns Whole Foods, how does that change? What does that mean? Where does it go? And one more piece, I'm curious your take on this. The story surfaced this week, and I didn't throw it in, but the story surfaced this week that Walmart has now told some of its key suppliers, oh, you're on AWS? Yeah, we're not going to work with you. Thanks, though.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And well, it's creating a lot of backlash. A lot of people are really pissed about it. I'm not even remotely surprised by it, to be fair. And you can call it Walmart bullying people, but Walmart for better or for worse has been doing that for years. And in a lot of cases, I'll give you a quick example where people get really pissed about it. But Walmart doing that has actually reduced the amount of packaging that we have on products all around the world, which means we have less waste, which means products ship lighter and they cost less. Long tail, that's not bad. So I think it's kind of interesting. I think the whole thing here is absolutely fascinating. And we're watching that merger, right? Online, offline, the worlds are colliding, and the lines are getting really blurry. Again, creates opportunities for everybody.
Right. Some of the things from a consumer standpoint, Michael, just really quick, on the music front, I evaluated a lot of the online music stores, and there's two major frustrations there. It depends on what platform you're using for, whether you're Echo or whether you're on Google's platform or Apple's platform, right? That's going to determine where you get your music. And there's no interoperability there at all, which is really annoying when you go to those different platforms.
Oh, I agree.
And get your music. The other thing is a lot of the major providers don't have any hi-fi or high-quality audio, and I think that that's an increasing trend that I'm seeing. And so I've settled on Spotify, and that's where I'm putting a lot of my efforts because they have the higher quality option, which is great. Now, on the regular Amazon user experience, not being able to tell Amazon how you want it shipped and not giving the option is super, super, super annoying, especially as they're using USPS more and more. So annoying. Yep. You basically don't get your stuff, especially on a weekend. So that's highly annoying as a business. And on their business front, Amazon's business account is a complete train wreck, just in case anyone's wondering. Complete train wreck. So they've definitely got some improvements to make on their on some of their offerings.
And that's going to be interesting to see how they play that out. As a quick note, because I know you want to talk about Cybereason, GreatHorn. So we've had Kevin O'Brien on the show. Really impressed with him and the vision and the way that it's working. $6.3 million Series A, which is fantastic. So congratulations, Kevin and team. Good job on that.
That's awesome.
And at some point, maybe we'll get a chance to bring Kevin back and see what they're up to. But I like the fact that they're looking at messaging security, and instead of just saying, look, here's the answer, just treat people like whack-a-mole and keep teaching them. How about we make some of these problems go away? And they're looking at doing that, so it's exciting. Cybereason, $100 million Series D. What's your thoughts?
Well, I like this one because Cybereason is a sponsor on the Security Weekly Network. And I have friends there that I've known that were at companies previous to Cybereason that are there now. I also like them because they're an Israeli-based startup, and I think that's such a fantastic market. and really just great people all around that are coming out of that region in technology and especially security. Love them all. Cybereason, interesting, $100 million Series D in a very crowded market.
That's what I was just going to ask about.
Yeah, makes it very hopeful for me. I like Cybereason. I think they're doing some things really correctly, and that is they have a free product that works really, really well. So in terms of marketing and user experience, I think Cybereason is one of the leaders for just that reason. They have a ransomware free detection tool that really helps get their name out there, and it works awesome. In fact, I believe it was one of the few software products that actually caught WannaCry. So
there you go. Well, so it's leading with value, right? I mean, that's the stuff I love looking at with it. I mean, $100 million round. So my first opinion was, holy cow, that's huge. And I didn't really see a lot on how they're going to use that money in order to fuel their growth. But then when I stepped back and I looked at it and I went, okay, hold on. This is the EDR space. It's insanely crowded. They've dubbed a bunch of unicorns in that space anyway. $100 million round, that it almost feels like they need that to be competitive. That's how they can differentiate themselves and show that they can hang in the space. And then when they add in those value adds and those touches, it does sound like they're doing it in a slightly different way. And to be fair, Cybereason's had nothing but positive press.
Yeah.
Whereas we look at some of the other unicorns. Oh yeah. They get slapped around pretty hard, and I think deservedly so. But I mean, so their Series A was $4.6 million. Then 2 years later, so that's great, by the way, right? You want your Series A to last a full year to two. Right. 2 years later, they closed a $25 million Series B, and then a couple months later, they got their Series C, and then 2 years later, they closed a Series D. And from B, $25 million to Series C, $59 million. And then a Series D at $100 million. I mean, that's a good story told in there, especially too. So they had a very quick raise from a B to a C, but clearly their valuation changed and the amount that they raised changed, and they really moved from right. So in a B, you're looking for that product market fit, and I'd have to go back and look at their timeline. But by the time they got to their Series C, and they're raising $60 million, yeah, that's what you would expect for a growth mode company, and in a crowded space. You've got to put the foot down on the accelerator. $100 million, that's a good weight to stick on your accelerator. So that's exciting stuff. That's great.
Alrighty. Updates on our journeys, Michael.
It's carrying on. I have been, you and I have talked a lot about balance. I've kind of had an awakening in the last couple of weeks, and I said, you know what? I think I need to stop working weekends. And the kids are off for school for the summer, and I'm going to cut out a little earlier in the day, and I'm going to do this odd thing called catching up on sleep. And I've been making sure I go out for my 5-mile walks. So what I'm finding is I have been so much more productive during the work week, and what I'm really doing now is kind of taking that long view to say, what do I need to go write about? We'll talk about this at some point in the future, but I've come to realize that this notion of a customer funnel I don't like. I don't want to just squeeze people through and push them out. I'm looking at much more of a journey and much more of how we can elevate people into whatever it is that they're doing. So it's been good. My journey is good. I've gotten a lot of really good validation. Some of our listeners have reached out. I'm helping some take a look at their value prop, having great conversations around it, and just getting deeper. I'm at that point where it's okay, I got it. And the vision's exciting. And now I'm just deepening my knowledge of it and getting ready for some updates to the framework and updates to stuff to help everybody do better. And I'm kind of calm. I'm digging it. Life is good, man. Nice. How about
you? Developer focus was one of the topics this week that we talked about, and it's one of the things you have to deal with a software startup of any kind. Is your developers in our example, the website, the web application, it doesn't work that great on mobile. And we're prioritization. That was the big focus this week, which is, it's hard. It has a constant struggle as you mature as a software organization. On the Security Weekly front, there is a brand new website that was largely my focus this week.
And it looks awesome. Paul, you did a great job on it. It loads fast. It's really clean. I like it.
I decided to just go ahead and do it myself because I was really frustrated with the help that I've tried to get over the years and recently with the website stuff. So I decided to just take a stab at it myself. So it's not as pretty, maybe, as if you had a designer in there. but I drew on my experience as a Linux administrator and just did it myself. So now I'm learning about performance and also Google rankings and Google AdWords, which is awesome. And there is an open position here for someone to help out with that as well. Do systems administration, website stuff, maybe some Python programming. Trying to combine that into the same role. I know it's going to be difficult, but we are looking for some help with that. In the meantime, I'm just trying to learn as much as I can about your web presence. I'm realizing how important that is for a startup or really any business, and to really help your business grow. I think it's one of those critical path things. So it's received some focus, which it hasn't in the past. So
that's awesome.
Which is good because expectations were low, right?
It's one of the things I read this week was if your expectations are too high, set them lower. Mm-hmm. Like it's a good way to take some stress off your back and figure some stuff out. So it's good, and I'm excited, my friend. We're almost at a year, and I like how this is coming together. And so for our audience, I mean, we give you updates on our journey. I love reading updates on your journeys. Those of you that have started stuff in the last year, I've responded to each of you, and I love hearing your stories. But also tell us how you're liking the journey of this program and what you want to see from us and what else we can cover. And as we continue, we're going to keep doing it. You'll notice, too, we've now started to ask our guests some more questions like what problem you're trying to solve, what value you're creating. We're going to keep doing that, too, because I think that's going to start helping the marketplace. And I teased a couple weeks ago, and Paul and I have chatted a little bit around maybe using some of the value prop stuff and starting to map out some of the startups. I mean, Paul, this was all the Boston show and the Israel connection with the Israeli startups in Boston. Like there's a lot happening in Boston, and we're even seeing some companies relocate to Boston for exactly that reason. Okay, well, so let's go profile some of those companies. I think we're seeing a lot of security startups in the DC region for some obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. Good. So, if you're listening, would that be interesting to you? If you're in the enterprise, to know some of the startups, to understand some of the problems that they're solving, what can we do that makes this as useful or more useful for you as we do that? And we're happy to look at some of those ways. And we now know Paul can completely recode the entire website. So
that's right.
we can make it work any way you want. It's done.
Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching this episode of Startup Security Weekly. We'll see everyone next time.